I was driving toward an intersection in early 2011 and I suddenly couldn't remember how to stop my car. Something in my head just told me to put my foot on the brake with my left foot instead of my right foot. By that time, the lights had already changed to red. And then I just sat in the car trying to figure out what had actually happened. I spent a couple of days in hospital and they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. The doctor ordered an MRI. Almost within minutes, like getting back to the room after having the MRI, the doctor turned up and held my hand and told me that there was a mass on my brain and said he was very sorry. I remember being wheeled down the corridor, and although I didn't see a ward number as they wheeled me into the room, I just thought to myself, well, you've got cancer. You wouldn't be in this ward if you didn't. And I wonder what that was going to mean for Dave and my kids.
It's like having 50 thoughts at once and trying to work out which is the good thought. And the good thought, she's still alive. The other 49 is she's going to die tomorrow.
The doctor said, you've got glioblastoma multiforme, GBM. I got my laptop out and Googled it, and it came up on the screen, the Terminator, and I was like, whoa. So then I started reading what that meant and realised that this was not good at all. You know, if I was really, really lucky, I'd see 18 months. And then I started going through my head about what I could fill those 18 months with, but very fast. Everything's happening very fast and also very slow, like you're watching a movie with someone else in it, but it's you. I was diagnosed with the same cancer that Lecretia Seales had and died from. It was around that time I came across the story of Brittany Maynard, who was a woman that moved to Oregon in order to be able to take her own life. And she sort of became the poster girl for euthanasia. It put a lot of thoughts into my head about, like, should we be promoting this? And the way that it was, it made me feel very vulnerable. And even at that early stage, which was a couple of years after I was diagnosed, that maybe I was being gutless because I didn't want to take my life. It really upset me. Dave would come home from work and find me a blithering mess because all it did was put pressure on me constantly to feel that I was being selfish by not taking my life.
When I've come back to help Mum, there's definitely a lot of changes. She's pretty much confined to the house so that, you know, she can't hang out washing, she couldn't shower. Just the littlest things that, you know, you take for granted, she just couldn't do anymore.
I was utterly exhausted, and although I didn't recognise it at the time, I now know that I was depressed. I decided that if this was how it's going to be, I didn't want to be here anymore. I counted out the pills. I was trying to figure out how many it would take to end my life. It's just something made me decide to have a cup of tea. And in those moments of having that cup of tea, I thought, no, not today, not today. So when I woke up the next day, I remember thinking to myself, what if I'd done it?
I think our terminally ill are probably the most vulnerable group in our society. I mean, there are reports that suggest that anywhere between 25 to 75% of terminally ill people suffer from depression at some time during their terminal illness. It's a time where you become more susceptible to persuasion, where you become more susceptible to coercion, and even to abuse.
If I'm manipulating you or you are trying to manipulate me, it might be that some years later that will be found to be wrongful conduct in a court of law, but it's not going to help us here and now. And by the time we find out what's actually happened, it may be too late in circumstances where someone has died.
I know what it's like to be so mentally and physically exhausted that it takes effort to even pick up your head. I know exactly what that feels like. I'm not cured. I'm still terminally ill. But the fact is, I was given 12 to 14 months and I have survived. It's almost 8 years now. So if I'd bought into that whole dying thing right from the beginning, which I think to some degree you do, I probably would have missed a lot of experiences that I've really enjoyed and had a lot of fun along the way. And I think all those things I would have missed. I've got 3 more grandchildren since then. Yeah, if I'd had a legal option, I doubt I would have been here because I would have made that commitment.
One of the main difficulties in New Zealand is that the health professionals aren't trained in palliative care sufficiently. We've got expert professionals in the specialty, but the doctors and nurses coming out of our education establishments have very limited time learning to care for people who are dying. We can't relieve all pain, if you like, because some of it is part of being human. It's a price that we pay for loving, if you like. It's the same with the notion of suffering. You know, everybody thinks, oh, well, all suffering should be relieved. Well, actually, it can't be, because a lot of suffering is psychosocial or spiritual. There isn't a drug to relieve that sort of suffering. That sort of suffering is relieved by intimate human contact. It's relieved by empathetic understanding. It's relieved by people knowing that they're not going to be abandoned. They're not going to be cut adrift. Just because there isn't a drug to deal with it, it doesn't mean to say it can't be helped.
I have good days and bad days. If I was to visit a doctor on one of those bad days and he was to offer me euthanasia as an option, I think that would just be awful. It'd be like offering nooses to people at a suicide clinic. It doesn't make any sense to me that we would even contemplate offering this as a medical choice, because it's not a medical choice.
I've come through my own battles with addiction, and Mum, in her worst, tough moments and vulnerable moments of her life, has stood by my side. I couldn't have asked for a better mum.
I get to talk to people all around the world about GBM, and this year I intend returning to work in some part-time capacity. Every day is a good day, and even when those days are really dark, they're still good days to be alive. I truly believe that this is a public issue, not a private one. We might think individually we have the right to make these choices, whereas I think we're not actually realising the impact that these individual choices might have on other people that are more vulnerable than, say, myself, that aren't in a position to fight or say no or even change their mind when it comes to the end. Someone even told me once that they felt that they were an inconvenient responsibility for their children and that their children were just waiting for them to die.
I think creating an opportunity for euthanasia or assisted dying sends absolutely the wrong message. I know that our lawmakers are trying to respond to a public cry to say, we've got to do this better, we've got to do it differently. But I honestly believe that legislating for assisted dying is absolutely the wrong way to go. We've got to be able to put our hand on our heart and say, we're doing our absolute best for every New Zealander at the end of life. It doesn't mean to say, it's too hard, so we're just going to kill people. That's not the way to go.
We can't promote suicide awareness and think euthanasia is okay. Neither are okay.